Today, we're gonna learn how to boom. Hey everyone, I'm Carson Hadlock and welcome to Carson Studios. In today's video, we're going to learn all about booming. Booming is just one way of capturing audio. It's the guy with the stick on set. The stick and the mic on the end. That's booming. It's just a way to capture audio. There's other ways to do this too. There's booming, there is just standing, which is just like a mic that's just sitting there. There is lav mics, and there's some other different ways to capture audio. But booming is just one of the ways, and it's the primary way of capturing audio on set. Now, you may be like, well, this isn't complicated, and it's not, because you're like, well, all it is just holding it out there, and it's not actually complicated, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to do it. There are some things that makes it so you get better audio when you're booming, and to make sure that you are more comfortable and it's not more of a tedious task than it needs to be. And once again, these are not like this is the way. There's not a set way to actually boom. There's just some things that work better. Because most of the time when people first get a boom pole, this is what they're looking like. That's gonna get overly tiring and the audio isn't gonna sound good and stuff. So the things that I'm going to be teaching you today are some things you guys can apply when you're booming to make sure that you guys can boom, to make your booming a lot better, easier, and you can capture better audio in the process. Alright, so we're starting out by setting up our boom pole. The first thing that you probably want to do is kind of set the size of your boom pole. And we don't want your boom pole to be any heavier than it needs to be. So you don't need to have it fully extended every single time. If you're in a room that you don't need to be fully extended, or there's a shot that's like, this is a close-up shot, you don't need to be 30 feet away. You can be right next to the shot. And so you don't ever want to make your boom pole longer than it has to be, because the longer that your boom pole is, the heavier it's going to be. And another thing, when you're extending your boom pole, you always want to extend the first layer first. Because like here, I have this first layer and I have this bottom layer. But if I extend the first layer, then I'm only bringing out that first layer. Right? But if I extend this bottom layer first, then I'm bringing the bottom layer and the top layer out, meaning that I'm bringing more weight out just because I'm having that bottom and the top layer instead of me just pulling out the top layer. And so make sure you're just pulling out that top layer first, because it'll be a lot lighter that way. It'll be a lot easier on you, so it doesn't get extremely heavy if there's like a long scene, you're holding it for a long time, you're holding it constantly on set. And so you always want to make sure that you're making this as light and easy for you as possible. Alright, so now we're going to put our mic on. This is a very complicated process. Watch closely. I know, maybe I should have made that like a paid course. You have to pay for that video. That was extremely complicated and no one could ever figure that out. Alright, now let's talk about chords and like how you're wrapping it up. I would honestly suggest getting a boom pole that has the cord inside of it. So all you have is a short cord here that you plug into the boom pole. The cord runs inside of it, then out at the bottom of it, then you can plug in another cord there. But my boom pole doesn't do that. I'm kind of ticked I didn't spend like $20 extra for that, because that is something that is super great. But if you're like me and you went cheap, then you'll have to like set up your boom pole. So you may have like all of this cord that you have to set up. And I have learned some tips and tricks on how to better set up that cord on the boom pole, because you don't want it super loose on here, because then if you're moving the boom pole and it's hitting against the pole, then you get that sound from that pole hitting coming up into the microphone, and the microphone's picking up that sound, and you don't want that. So when you're setting up your boom, you want to keep your cord tight on the boom pole, but you have to make sure that you're leaving some slack at the top and at the bottom. The reason you want to leave slack at the top right there is so you can actually move the mic, because there's times that you may need to do that. So one really great way to do that is to make a little loop, is to not even like have slack here, but it's still pretty tight, so you can't really move down that much. So then you loop it, you make a little loop at the top, and then we will hook that on right there. So then if we need to, all we have to do is pull out that loop, then we can bring it down and pull it through, make it tight. And so I do always suggest making those loops, like at least one loop on the front to keep it semi-tight, but to make sure that you can move the mic. And we'll get into that a little bit when you're actually like booming and that like art and part of it. But there's a lot of times when you need to move the microphone forward or backward depending on background noise and stuff. So make sure that you keep that loop there. Then coming down, you want to keep this tight. You want to keep it just as tight, because you don't want it hitting up against the thing. And you don't want to have it too tight, then you're like breaking your cord, but keep it tight so that you're not, totally adding some noise that you don't need. Okay, so this depends on how your audio setup is. If you're more on the indie, that means that you're probably just gonna have an audio recorder. And so for me, I just have this Zoom recorder, which is what I'm actually recording audio with right now. And so that would be like in my pocket. And then the cord would plug into there. So I have all of this extra cord right here. What am I supposed to do with it? Because you don't want that dragging on the ground. So right here, this is really a nice place that you make sure you keep it tight, but then you loop up the cord here. And this one gets a lot more bulky, but you loop up the cord there, here, and then you strap around that. All right, okay, so we have all of that wadded up. You'll notice there's a lot extra. But another important thing is to make sure you do have slack here, and probably extra slack than you'd think you'd need, because you want to be comfortable. You don't want to be tight up here with it. You want to be able to plug it into the recorder and be able to move around freely. And a great thing about having it rolled up here is that you can easily just pull one out if you need it. And this, if it's just hitting against your body, then that's not going to generate noise to this. And if it's wrapped up like this, then that cord should be like on the outside, so it's not really going to make noise here. And so if we look, we have our whole thing set up, one loop here, it's tight here, and it is loose here, but that's okay because we can hold that, we hold it there. And so our boom pole is set up and ready, and we have our extra slack line here, and then this cord that will plug into the recorder and probably go in my pocket. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual art, in quotation marks, of booming. Some different tips and things to booming. Now, this is something that you want to do even if you're not booming, with other audio too. And I'm not doing that now because I'm recording alone, okay? There is some limitations to this. So you need to constantly be manning that audio. Always have headphones in, listening onto the recorder or something like that. And if your recorder doesn't allow that, then you need to get a better recorder. You can literally get a recorder for $40 that can still do that. So let's talk about first just holding the boom pole. Most people you see, they're holding it like clear up here as high as they possibly can, and that's just more weight being put on you. That you're putting more work on yourself by holding it clear up here. That's more work. So what you want to do is keep the boom pole as low as possible when you're holding it. If you don't need it up here, then have it where you need it. Keep it like down right here, right there, wherever you need it. You don't need it clear up here. You could have it as low. You always want to keep it as low as possible because that's going to be less work for you. Another thing is you want to keep your fingers loose. You don't want to have a tight grip on the boom pole because if you're moving your hands, that generates noise in the boom pole and it adds onto the mic. So you want to keep your fingers loose. This one, you kind of want that part just resting on your finger and thumb right there, but keeping your fingers light. And then on the back, you kind of have a hand on it, but you're not gripping it. It's just there, balancing it, making sure that it's good, but you're not making a ton of movements, and you're keeping your fingers light and just off. You're keeping it steady, you're keeping it good, but you're not like totally holding on. You're gonna keep your fingers loose on both of the handles. And another thing is you don't want it gripped on both ones. Crap. You don't want it gripped on both. You want to make sure that first one is just there to stabilize it. This back one is keeping it more balanced because you notice it like totally falls forward. So that one is just making sure it's balanced. And that is kind of the goal. And you can even flip it around because, you could get tired. So it's like, then you're doing that. All right, so then when you're actually recording, when you're recording your audio and you're actually in frame, you guys need to make sure that you're following the audio. You can't just stand there in one place for the whole scene. Even you need to follow the audio the entire time, because when you're booming, you use a shotgun mic, unless you're not, and then I don't know why you wouldn't. But you use a shotgun mic, and a shotgun mic is semi-directional, meaning that it only picks up audio in this direction right here, out in front of it. Lav mics and stuff like that is omnidirectional, so it picks it up everywhere. But since a boom pole is semi-directional, it only picks up audio goodly in that little place. Once you get outside of that, then the audio gets super echoey because it's not in that direction. And so to make sure you're getting good audio with the boom, you have to make sure that the mic is following the audio so it's not getting echoey. You need to make sure that that you're following it, keeping it pointed towards those people. If two people are having a conversation, then you're going to want to make sure that like you're pointing the mic towards them. So if there's a person here, then when they're talking, you'll point the mic at them so it's picking up theirs. And then you'll flip it once the next person starts talking. And you're constantly moving the audio, following where you're supposed to be picking up audio. You're constantly following, trying to figure out and pick up the best audio that you possibly can. And another note with picking up good audio is making sure that the mic is in a good direction. You always want because there could be times where there's background noise. Say you're recording at like an ocean or something, and there's waves hitting, but you don't want that in your audio because it's gonna make the audio sound bad, right? And it's gonna be echoey because it's not in the direction and stuff, so it's just gonna sound bad. So if, let's say that the waves are behind you, so you want to point your mic away from those waves. You want to get it to where the mic is pointing away. If the waves are coming in from over here, the mic is pointing over here away from those waves so it can pick up as little amount of that sound as possible. And it could be the same like if it's the other way, that you can just flip it like this and then kind of come around and into the scene, still following audio, but making sure you're kind of getting that background noise out and away, so you're like getting rid of that background noise as much as you possibly can. So mic movement is really important as well. And there you have it. That is my tips and tricks to booming, setting it up actually like booming, you know? And I hope that you guys have picked up some of these and are going to use it when you guys are booming next on set. Some of the key things to remember is to make sure that your chords are pretty tight. Make sure that you're kind of wrapping it, keeping it loose, sort of. Make sure you're not doing any more work than you need to. Make it as light as you can, and make sure that you're like keeping it as low as possible, and make sure you're always following your subjects. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.